Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue our notes on absolute values. So we're going to try to do a little bit more graphing, and then we're going to work on function values. So we are going to graph f of x is equal to negative 1/2 absolute value x minus 2 plus 5. All right, first thing I need is I need a graph. Okay, so the very first thing that I notice about this particular function is that there is a negative in the front. So that means it's going to have an x-axis reflection, which means it will have a maximum value. Okay, second thing I notice is there's a negative 1/2. So that means since this is an absolute value function, it looks like a v as a slope. So our slope is going to be 1/2. Now remember, since it's a maximum, it's going to have a positive 1/2 on the right, and then a negative 1/2 on the left. Okay. We can also tell that our graph moves right 2 and up 5. Placing our vertex at 2, 5. Okay, absolute values are easier to graph than parabolas. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to graph the point 2, 5 right there. Okay, and then we're going to count out our slope. So remember, it's negative on the left, 1 over 2, 1 over 2, 1 over 2, 1 over 2, and then positive on the right. Make sure you get that correct shape. You don't want to accidentally draw a parabola. This should look like a V or an A with nice straight lines. And there you go. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to do, since we've gone from function to graph, now we're going to try to go graph to function. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with a picture. All right. So let's make my picture look like this. A little bit free-handed. Okay, it doesn't look too bad. Okay, so the very first thing I notice is this is a maximum. So I know when I write my function, okay, this is going to be a negative. All right. If I count out my slope, I notice that it's 4 and then over 1. So 4 over 1. I also notice that my vertex right here is at the point 2, 6. So it'd be negative 2 plus plus 6, like that. Okay, so it's not too bad. Let's clean that up, make it look a little bit prettier. Just like that. Okay, all right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to do function values. Okay, so you guys have found function values before. Okay, and if you do it by, you can do it two ways. You can do it by algebra, or you can do it by the graph. Okay, so we're going to do algebra first. Okay, let's say, for example, I have the function f of x equals 5 absolute value x minus 4 plus 12. Okay, now we're going to do two different types of these. So the first type is the one that you're really familiar with, where I ask you like f of 2. The second type you might not be so familiar with, we ask you where f of x is equal to 10. Okay, so when you are asked for f of 2, what you're going to do is simply, wherever you see an x, you're going to place a 2, and you're going to evaluate just like that. Okay, now this next one where it says f of x is equal to 10, that's more equation solving. Okay, so what you do is you take your function f of x is equal to the absolute 5 times the absolute value x minus 4 plus 12, and then you set it equal to 10. Like that. So we have an equation to solve. So just out of habit, I'm going to switch this around. Okay. So we're going to subtract off the 12. Divide by 5. Now some of you are going, wait a minute. I have an absolute value of x minus 4 equaling a negative 2/5. Absolute value expression cannot equal a negative, so this has no solution. Okay, so when you're asked f of a number, you plug in that number for x. When you're asked f of x is equal to a number, you plug in that number for your y value and solve the equation. Okay? All right, now there's a second way to do this, which is by graphing. Okay, so I'm going to give you another equation. Okay, and we're going to find these type of answers by graphing. Okay. All right, so let's graph. Okay, there's my function. I'm going to graph it. Okay. So let's see, I would have a minimum, I would have a slope of 2, and my vertex would be at 3, -5. So let's find 3, -5 first. Okay. And then let's count out my slope of 2 over 1. Making my v. Oops. All right. Whenever you solve something by graphing, you want to make sure your graph is as neat as you can get it. Makes life a little bit easier. Okay. All right. So if I ask you to find f of 2, okay, I want to know what's going on when x equals 2. Okay. So basically, you're looking for a y value. So f of 2. So you find x equals 2. You go down to your graph, and you find the y value. Well, the y value happens to be -3. Like that. So you just find the point. Okay. Now it gets a little bit tougher if I ask you to find f of x is equal to, let's say 5. Okay. So graphically, what you would do is you would graph the line y equals 5. Like that. And you see where they cross. Now, if your graph is super neat, then you can just pull the point off the graph. So x is equal to -2. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now if your graph is not super neat, you might want to verify that through some algebra. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and we'll do another video in a bit. Okay, all right, so have a good one.